Good morning, and thank you so much for coming to today's State of the Public Service event. These events have been run throughout Australia, and it's my great pleasure to be facilitating today. My name is Nick Miller, and I'm the Director and CFO at the Asbestos Safety and Eradication Agency. We're a small micro-agency based in Sydney. We're actually an agency of 12, so I think one of the smallest in the public service. Before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we are meeting today, the Darug people, and pay my respects to elders past and present. I would also like to extend that respect to Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander people present today. Today you'll hear from 3 speakers who will provide an overview and update of the state of the Australian Public Service right now and what it might look like in the future. We'll start with Mary Wiley-Smith, who's the Deputy Commissioner, Australian Public Service Commission, who will deliver an overview of the 2017-18 State of the Service report. So this is the document which we'll be focusing on today. There are copies at the front, so if you haven't got a copy, please make sure you get one today. Or for those who prefer, it's obviously available online as well too. So Mary will look at details of the APS employment data specific to New South Wales. Mary will be followed by Will Story, First Assistant Secretary. Independent review of the APS will provide an update on the APS review, including the learning so far that will be used to inform the review's recommendations to the Australian Government. Then we'll hear from Michael De Francesco, Assistant Secretary, Public Service Reform from the Department of Finance, who'll present a summary of the modernisation work currently being carried out by the Secretaries through the APS Reform Committee. So I think with those words, I think we're now ready to welcome our first speaker. So if you give a warm round of applause to Mary Wiley-Smith.
So good morning. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you today. And let me begin by also acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders both past and present. I'd like to welcome you to the State of the Public Service Roadshow. This is my first as Deputy Commissioner. Today's events will provide an overview of the key themes and findings from the State of the Service report. It will dive into employment data for the APS in New South Wales and hopefully provide you with an insight into what will be forthcoming in the year ahead. It's pretty fair to say that 2019 is already shaping up to be a fairly busy year. Apart from the many varied issues facing government, there's also going to be a federal election, and we have a strong focus on reform in the APS, and you'll hear a little bit more about that in today's discussion. The report itself highlights the changing APS context, and it echoes David Thodey, the chair of the Independent APS Review's views on the public service, and that is that the Australian public service is not broken. But what we do need to do is to be ready to respond to government, to changing community expectations, and just to be able to deal with the sheer pace of change, particularly technological change. A number of global and local trends have implications for the future of the APS workforce. These include a decline in public trust, an ageing workforce, and the rise of the digital economy, globalisation, and artificial intelligence. New ways of working, better use of data, and harnessing these new technologies will help to drive a more responsive public service. While change is needed, we also need to be very aware that it has to be managed very carefully. So the government and the public still want a sense of continuity and stability from the APS. Services and regulatory functions still need to be delivered for the Australian community and sound advice provided to government. So the 21st State of the Service report was released late last year. Its release came against the backdrop of a major focus on reform on how to prepare the APS for the future. We have 2 reform processes currently underway that you'll hear about today. The first one is the Modernising the Public Service through the work of the Secretaries Reform Committee, and we don't say ARC because we know that's a little bit confusing, but we call it the ARC, which the secretaries seem to quite like. So that's the first process, and we'll talk a bit more about that. And then the second process that's going is the independent review of the APS, which is being led by David Thodey. And the government will be presented with the Thodey review on the future of public service in around mid this year. It will make recommendations designed to ensure that APS is relevant and fit for purpose in the coming decades. So they're looking at 2030 and beyond. This will be the most comprehensive review of the APS since the Coombs Royal Commission in 1976. And I know that an extraordinarily very thorough amount of detailed work is going into that review. And Will Story, who's sitting in the front seat here, he's from the APS review team. He's going to talk a little bit more with you about the review and the progress and where the independent review are up to. Michael Di Francesco is also joining us today from the Department of Finance, and he's going to provide an update on the work being undertaken by the secretaries through their reform committee, or ARC, which is really focused on modernising the public service today and focusing on better delivery for Australians, for services, particularly for Australians. If you like to think about it, we've got reform that's happening in the future with the David Thodey review. It's really future focused. But we've got a group of secretaries and leaders across the service who are saying we need to do things now and we can't just wait. We know what we need to achieve, and it's just no regret changes that we can do. So you've got a short-term kind of review and you've got the longer term with Thodey. My strong sense is that these two streams of work will reinforce each other, and it'll be a watershed for public administration in Australia. Now, you can be pretty cynical sometimes, and when we've had so many reviews in the public service over the last 15 years, I believe we've had about 18. And many of these recommendations have essentially been put on a bookshelf. However, at the time, they're accepted normally by the government of the day and also by the executive of agencies. But somewhere along the line, we don't actually implement their recommendations. And if you read some of the old reviews, you'll see that the recommendations make very good sense and are very relevant to us today. But what I think is really different about what's going on this year is that we have a deep conversation around change in the APS. It's happening in our leadership. We've got secretaries taking a really strong leadership role, looking at what we could do for the future. We've also got change being discussed by politicians, amongst commentators, and this has really started to take a momentum of its own. The fact that the Thodey review is asking for public contributions has also meant that there's expectations now coming through from the public. I also think that it's important to distinguish the reforms that require government action and those that can be implemented by the APS itself. There's much we can do ourselves regarding our stewardship, structure, accountability, and our talent and capability management. So going back to the report, the State of the Service report for last year really centred on three themes, and they're really around the high-level workforce components that we need to ensure that we are fit for purpose both now and to the future. So we knew that the review processes were happening. So the themes we really concentrated on was leadership, capability, and culture. So those were the three things that we really wanted to focus on. But before I get into those themes, let me paint a really quick picture of the APS. Now, we have 150,594 employees in the public service across 105 agencies working to deliver a range of services across Australia and overseas. The most common job family of employees in the public service is service delivery, followed by compliance and regulation. Now, I'd like you all to raise your hand. It's all right, go with me on this. Leave your hand up if you're female. Keep your hand raised if you're over 40 years of age and you're happy for us to know. Leave your hand up if you have a bachelor degree. Leave your hand up if you're APS 4 level. Congratulations. You represent the average public servant in New South Wales. So the typical APS employee in New South Wales is a 40-year-old, 45-year-old female, and her name is Michelle. Is your name Michelle?
Yeah.
Just thought I'd check. She's university educated with a bachelor degree in business, And Michelle is an APS 4 who joined the APS about 11.5 years ago. So we might just have a quick look at New South Wales in terms of a bit of a snapshot. We have 28,000 APS staff working across New South Wales. This makes New South Wales the second largest cohort in the Australian Public Service outside of the ACT. And it makes up 18.5% of the public service. Of that 18.5% in New South Wales, 24,230 are ongoing and 3,640 are non-ongoing positions. This means that around 87% of New South Wales public service is ongoing or permanent. We can also see from the data that our workforce is steadily ageing. In the last 10 years, the mean age of APS employees in New South Wales has increased from 42.2 years to 44.9 years. The New South Wales workforce is around 1.5 years older than the overall public service average. And almost 2 in 5, or 38% of staff work in service delivery areas. And the other common job roles are compliance and regulation at 22% and administration at 15%. Now I might quickly just return to the report. And as I mentioned, they've got 3 key themes in the report, and the first one I want to talk to you about is leadership. As strong leadership is pretty central and critical to the APS performance overall. And in the public service, we do have an expectation that leadership is exercised at a range of levels. So in the 2018 APS employee census, employees rated their supervisors favourably on all questions. The strongest positive response was to the question of whether their senior executive manager is of high quality. In New South Wales, there was a lower proportion of staff who agreed that their SES manager was of high quality. 60% agreed in New South Wales compared to 65% across the APS. Nationally, employees are less likely to agree that the senior executives across the organisation work as a team. With a strong and united leadership being a key driver in managing change and driving performance, I see this as an area of improvement. Most agencies have also provided feedback that a priority area for capability development is leadership, specifically in resilience and change management. I love that noise, it's okay. Submissions to the independent review that we will talk about shortly have also emphasised the importance of leadership for the future, and this is really due to the competition for talent that will occur over the next 10 to 20 years. Key characteristics discussed include a more inclusive leadership style, where alternative viewpoints are sought, delegation is undertaken effectively, and measured risk-taking is encouraged. Additionally, the development of soft skills has been identified as absolutely vital for senior officials in public service. So, how the APS best develops the leadership capability of employees in the future will be an area of focus for both the independent review of the APS, but it's also something that we in the Australian Public Service Commission are looking at, and how we actually support colleagues in their departments into the future. The second theme of the review was capability, or I should say the report was capability, and the report highlights that building capability for the future is an absolute must. In an increasingly digital world, digital skills, data analysis and reporting have been highlighted by agencies as a priority for capability development. At the same time, the APS will continue to require professional public service capabilities, such as policy expertise, to deliver standards government and the citizens expect. I'm also very conscious of the critical importance of the need to value operational, commercial, financial and technical skills as highly as we do policy skills. I suspect that many problems could have been prevented if we had operational and technical teams having the same access to decision makers as those with policy responsibility. A high-performing public sector is demonstrated by its ability to influence and development on government outcomes. And I should mention that, as we all know, the capabilities required to be an effective APS are not static. So we must continuously renew and refresh our ability to provide expert advice and effective services to the public. We need to continuously develop our workforce and enable employees to move freely, both within and throughout the system. From our workforce data, we know that only 2.5% of the public service moves to a different agency each year. In New South Wales, the mobility rate is less than that. It's sitting at about 1%. Now, what we don't measure here is the mobility that happens within agencies, and we're very conscious that some of the very large agencies, people do move around a lot and have the opportunities that they need to develop and to build capability. But we're also quite keen on the staff being able to actually move between agencies in the public service. And what we know from the data is that the majority of APS staff have only worked for one agency. It's also worth noting that a quarter of externally hired SES leave within 2 years, and 92% of promotions in 2017 were internal. This points to another issue, and that is that the APS must be more permeable and mobile in order to foster diversity of thinking, contestability of ideas, and just to assist in capability development. But as I mentioned before, with change, with mobility, we also need balance. Too much poorly targeted mobility can have the adverse impact, and we risk losing people with subject matter expertise. The last theme I just wanted to raise with you that in the report was culture. And we know that to build a trusted and effective APS, a foundational set of values and behaviours must underpin our culture. We need to demonstrate high levels of personal integrity while still adhering to the APS values and code of conduct. These behaviours are essential in building relationships with the community and also the government of the day. They have always been important, and they are especially so today when we face declining trust in public institutions. Our data indicates that the APS operates with strong integrity and low levels of corruption. Most employees in New South Wales and nationally agree that their colleagues, supervisors and senior leaders all act in accordance with APS values. A very small number of employees, 72, in an APS of some 150,000 were found to have breached the code of conduct for behaviour that could be categorised as corrupt. The APS is also well regarded by international benchmarks and also by peers for its integrity processes and structures. There can, however, be no complacency. As you all would be aware, it's very difficult to build trust, and it's very easy to lose it. It's also widely seen that the APS culture is risk averse. Our data provides some further insights. Most employees agree that the agency supports escalation of risks and that risk-related concerns are discussed openly and honestly. However, less than half agreed that employees in the agency had the right skills to manage risks effectively, that appropriate risk-taking was rewarded, and when things went wrong, the agency used it as an opportunity to review, learn and improve. Along with risk management, change management is also an area identified for further improvement. This view is shared by both employees and also by the agencies themselves. In this year's employee census, just over a third of employees agree that change is managed well. When agencies were asked about their change management capability in 2017, 87% identified that they needed to improve. So we might move on to some good news. So diversity. We continue to see a positive trend in diversity in the APS. Work groups and supervisors are perceived to be accepting and understanding of diversity and inclusion more broadly. Agencies are working well to improve awareness of Indigenous culture in the workplace, and there's a focus on expanding the range of Indigenous employment opportunities and increasing the representation of Indigenous employees in senior levels. In other welcome news, the census results highlight that the experience of our LGBTI staff is broadly positive, and the number of women in SES roles is at its highest since 2000. As I noted earlier, our workforce is steadily ageing. In the future, we will need to appeal to both a young workforce but also an ageing population through flexible and meaningful work. Increasing the diversity of our workforce is also important for the APS to effectively serve a diverse Australian community. We need to reflect the nation that we are, comprising people from other countries who have come to Australia to provide a better life for themselves and also for their families. We need and we want the APS to reflect that diversity, but at the moment we do fall short. Culturally and linguistically diverse groups comprise a significant proportion of Australia's population. 26% of Australians were born overseas and 21% of Australians speak a language other than English. In comparison, a lower proportion of respondents to the 2018 APS employee census, 22%, reported being born overseas and 18% reported speaking a language other than English at home. It's good to note that in New South Wales, you have more staff from a non-English speaking background than the national average. The report shows that almost 26% of New South Wales public servants report as being from a non-English speaking background, compared to 14% nationally. Disability is another area where we must maintain our focus over the next decade. In 2018, just 3.7% of employees reported living with a disability to their agency. This contrasts with 8.7% of employees who reported living with a disability in the confidential APS census. So for some reason, we've got quite a number of staff living with a disability that are really not comfortable disclosing this to their employer. But by either measure, the APS is still not reflecting the Australian community, where we have 1 in 5 Australians who live with a disability. So we'll continue to work with agencies and employees to improve this performance and to ensure our systems and cultures do not stand in the way of people with disability to have a fulfilling APS career. The State of the Service report also highlights that public trust in governments in many countries, including Australia, is in decline. The report references the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is an annual online survey of trust in 28 markets from around the world. In 2018, we ranked 19th across the 28 countries. We had an overall score of 35% trust, which is trust across all 3 levels of government. And this is well below their average at 43%. On a slightly more positive note, the recently released 2019 barometer reported an improvement in Australia's trust in government score, which is a little bit closer now to the global average. David Thodey in the APS review also raises the issue of trust. He raises the idea that the APS needs to be a trusted partner to government and to the Australian people. We know that trust is influenced by citizens' experience in receiving government services, the level of citizen engagement we pursue, and whether we're inclusive in designing policy, appropriate regulation, and in the integrity of our own institutions. In my opinion, trust increases when there's a heightened sense of mutual respect. And our job as the Australian public servants is to help government to effectively and efficiently meet the hopes and aspirations of the Australian people. If we do this well, we will build trust in the service. We also need to hold on to the concept that Australians are citizens and connected to government. They're not simply the consumers in what we have to offer. We need to hold on to the idea that government and the APS should serve the people in pursuit of a collective good. In line with building trust, we also need to get a little bit better at building our brand. We need to get better at speaking about the spirit of the service, what drives us to achieve results, and to develop new and diverse ways of delivering policies and services that make a difference to people's lives. We also need to further the understanding of the amazing work that we do in the APS. From helping drought-stricken farmers, flood-affected communities, to looking after geospatial intelligence and data mining, and gathering Australian border and cyber intelligence, right through to establishing the National Disability Insurance Scheme. The Australian Public Service Commissioner, Peter Woolcott, has actually asked us within the Australian Public Service Commission to start to publicly share our stories of success. Talk about our innovations and the change that is being managed across the service, because there's many wonderful stories, and unfortunately what we normally hear is just when things go wrong. So there's a bit of a brand focus at the moment, and also trying to actually build our culture across the service and be proud of what we do and what we achieve. So in conclusion, let me wrap up by saying that the fundamental purpose of government is to keep Australian people safe and to keep Australia prosperous. We promote laws and regulations. Government provides services that the private sector cannot or would not provide, ranging from medical payments through to food safety standards and diplomatic consular services. This year, the APS does face some real challenges in managing a complex future, where expectations of government and the expectations of the public have never been higher. And this is why reform will be absolutely critical to what unfolds over the next year. And on that note, I'm going to conclude and hand over to Will Story, who's going to talk to you about the David Thodey review and some of the reform that could come from that process. So thank you for your time today, and Will.
Thank you, colleagues. Let me just join my colleagues in acknowledging we're on Aboriginal land and pay my respects to their elders past and present. Look, I guess you got a bio, so you get a sense of me, at least my professional history, but I guess that doesn't tell you too much. I want to add just a little bit of flavour. I'm from Brisbane. I moved to Canberra 14 or 15 years ago. And I moved to join the Attorney General's Department. I did it because I really wanted to do this particular type of law. As a lawyer up in Brisbane, I wanted to do this particular job. Now, I didn't want to join the APS. I probably didn't know what that acronym meant at the time. But I guess what happens is you start to get the juice after a point, and you get what I think, let's get this. You know, you start to get this spirit of service, this sense that what you're doing there is something greater. And I guess all of us come to work for different reasons, you know, to pay the bills, to do something, to meet colleagues and make a difference and to expand and develop. But one of these things, these critical things that David Thodey has mentioned and has just struck him as coming from a private sector, is the spirit of service that permeates across the APS. And it's an invaluable strength that we've got. It helps us motivate and attract people. And it helps us do great things. So I'm going to start there. Today I want to give you a sense where this APS review is up to, but I guess I don't sort of know exactly how much you know about the APS, so can I do this little hand thing as well? So if I can ask you to raise your hands, and I'll ask you to put them down if you hadn't heard of the APS review before you came here today, and that's all right. And then my next one, just one more. Has anyone been to our website or engaged with our review in person? Oh, fantastic. Well, that's great. It means we're getting out. So thank you. Look, let me give you some more numbers just to help tell the story. 2030, the review has used that as the year to which we're aiming for. It's designed to give us a real future focus. 118, well, that's the number of years we've been around. It gives you a sense that we're part of this big, enduring tradition. 42, it's not the meaning of life. In this case, it's the number of years since the last large-scale review of the APS, which sort of set up the APS that we sort of know today. 1300, that's the number of substantial contributions that we've had by way of submissions and online comments. But we've spoken to many more public servants through the panel meetings, through stakeholder meetings in Canberra, in Sydney, around the country. We've in fact visited all states and territories as well. 5,000, that's the number of people who have subscribed to our website and to get updates. So if you haven't, I encourage you to Google APS Review, get on and subscribe. We'll keep you updated that way. To these numbers, I'd add one more point. Both the government and the opposition have welcomed and engaged with the review. I guess I wouldn't normally mention this, but it's a very common question we get asked at forums like this. All right, so look, where's the review up to? Well, it's been around for about 8 months. In that time, it's listened and talked to a lot of people. The panel has heard a lot about strengths and frustrations, about what we need for the future. David Thodey, the chair of the panel, has identified a vision for the APS, united in a collective endeavour. I'll come to each of these separately, so let me just run through the 5 first. That we'll be united in a collective endeavour, pursuing the same objectives, working to achieve them. That we'll be a trusted and respected partner, work in dynamic, agile and flexible ways. An employer of choice, great to work for, and world-class at what we do, aspiring to do better and doing great outcomes for the Australian people. Now this vision's born out of thousands of outputs, so let me just spend a little bit of time working through each of those. First united in a collective endeavour. Look, sometimes we talk about being one APS, and I think sometimes we talk about it more than we live it. We're all made up of different parts, we've got a lot of different roles to play, but I suspect that we can and should harness all the skills and capacity and the passion that you've all got and we've all got to help make Australia a better place. So the panel's vision for 2030, we as a service will have a common purpose, confidently serve the government, parliament, the people. I guess our default will be working together, not interagency disputes. The panel's been struck by 2 points. How can it be that an organisation of 155,000 people doesn't have this single clear common purpose, that we default to agency purposes? And why is it that 50% of us said that our primary allegiance is to our agency, I guess its interests, rather than that of the APS and that of the country? On to a trusted and respected partner. So the panel recognises that increasingly we need good relationships if we're going to see it and deliver on our mission. So in 2030, we'll work with stakeholders to get their insights and buy-in. We'll talk easily to our clients, customers and citizens to find out what they need. We'll sit down with community partners to enable to work out solutions. Now many of us do this already, but it's not always the default. Sometimes it can feel hard to push to do this in your day-to-day work. Dynamic, flexible systems and resources. This is about how we work. It's about our culture and systems structures. They need to support a resilient, adaptable APS that's stable, but responds quickly when it's needed. Gets that balance right. Look, I think we've all got frustrations with how we run ourselves. I mean, everyone does. We probably always will, let's face it, it's human nature. But the panel's convinced that there's a real opportunity to harness the full resources and ability of the APS to use our digital enablers, get our priorities right and seize the opportunities and how we deploy our resources effectively. There's a huge appetite in the service to make this happen. People are at the centre of the APS. We're nothing without you. And the panel's concerned that sometimes how we're set up doesn't always support us to do our best. Public service should be, and it is a badge of honour, and we need to make it so. People are the guiding mind, the ears and arms, the eyes and ears, the arms and legs, and even, dare I say, the heart of the APS. The panel is convinced that this service needs to be great to work for if we're going to succeed. World-class global leaders. This one is about ambition. It's about our mindset. It's about our impact. It's about being relentlessly focused on great work that helps people. Citizen-focused, people-focused. Look, there's plenty of great advice out there about how to do your job better. I know that. The panel's really keen to make sure that you've got every opportunity to do that great work. Our panel wants to help us put the Australian people at the forefront of everything that we do and get the structures, orientation and support that we need to do excellent work. So I guess that's the APS Review's focus. That's the vision that the panel has set out. It's asked you online for feedback on how we can get there, and I'd encourage you to engage and share your views about that. This brings us really to the bottom line. Why do we need to change? Do we need to change? And how should we go about it? The review panel is very clear that the APS has a critical role in Australia's economy, our society, and in our system of democracy. That message comes through in all our discussions, including outside the service. And the panel is also very clear that the APS is going to have a critical role in helping Australia, people, grab the opportunities that are going to come in the future and deal with the implications too. We're going to help meet future challenges, and critically, we're going to support those people and communities who are trying to turn things around. So the panel's view is that now is the time to reinvest in the APS's future. Not for us, but for the people of Australia. The panel's also convinced that we start from a position of strength, not least because of our motivated and talented people, not least because of that spirit of service that I mentioned at the start. But we equally need to readily acknowledge the frustrations that we do experience now. The panel's talked about a sense that we're not meeting expectations or fulfilling our potential. Some people are losing confidence, the institution might be losing confidence. Sometimes our priorities are scattered, sometimes our working relationship up to government, out to the people, with our partners in the community, can be fragile. Structures and processes can get in the way. I guess the effect can be, sometimes we struggle to get and keep people we need. If we don't leave these, if we leave these issues unaddressed, we'll see them grow, become entrenched. And there'll be real weaknesses for us in the future. And finally, there are curveballs that are coming our way. And we can't predict the future. But like a good family, or if you're running a sporting organisation or any sort of club, you can prepare for it. That's what we need to do. That's why the panel has commissioned research on what the future could look like and what our operating environment might be out to 2030. We published that research. It's a great piece of work. It draws on the insights of a survey of 2,300 public servants, as well as international views on megatrends. Basically, it says there are 4 big unknowns that are going to affect how we work in our environment in the future. Things like advances in technology and the opportunities that brings. Changing citizen expectations, growing citizen expectations for us to do things better. Social changes within countries. Political power is changing. Trust is changing. And changes in the way we work, in our workplaces. And these forces, these trends, will play out differently. We don't quite know exactly how they'll play out. But the research confirms that right now we're not ready to take advantage of all the opportunities that are going to come and address the implications. And history as well says that sometimes we're slow to change. The service still looks and operates like it did 30 or 40 years ago. Our panel wants to give us the setup we need to adapt much more quickly. There's an appetite for this change. It comes through in the submissions, comes through in every interaction that we have. So the panel sees opportunities and wants to ensure that the APS is re-empowered to thrive and deliver great work that helps people in the future. Well, here's the plan, or at least it's the panel trying to work out the plan. So that's a picture from a panel meeting earlier this month with panel members, classic whiteboarding, trying to prioritise reform ideas that they think are the ones that will help us succeed. The David Thady is going to do an address towards the end of March, which he'll release the panel's priorities for change and seek more input in shaping, testing and developing those ideas. They're going to want your feedback on whether it's transformative enough, whether it's heading in the right direction and how we make change stick. And the panel will then take that feedback into account and deliver final recommendations for government. I guess if I can leave you with one message today, it's that change doesn't happen because it's written up in a beautiful book that sits on a bookshelf or lives somewhere online. It happens because people, systems and culture, behaviour and practices of what we do every day changes. And I guess to echo Mary's point, we are at a watershed moment in the history of public sector reform. Don't to make it academic, but there is an opportunity we have right now to make things better. And the review, in my view, provides a platform for us to make the change we're needed. We're going to need government to play its part in some things, but critically, much of what needs to be done can be done by us at all levels. So look, it's in testing ideas that you come up with better ones, so I look forward to questions today and it'd be great to chat afterwards. And when you leave this room, please help shape this review's work. It's our future, it's our opportunity to help make us more effective in doing the job that you want to do for the country. So you can get on our website, you can leave our comment, you can add to the picture that we have, you can subscribe to get a heads up on new information coming out in March and be part of that conversation. So look, no one's waiting for the review to act. My colleagues here will attest to that. I'll hand over to Michael. Thank you.
Well, good morning, everybody. And thank you for the warm welcome, Hannah. I too would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we live today and pay my respects to elders, both past and present. I'd also like to extend that respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present today. Before I start, I'd like to pick up on two things that Mary referred to in her presentation. First is around the value of permeability, and I'm pleased to say that I'm actually an example of that. I joined the APS last Monday, My previous role was in academia. As a faculty member at the Australian and New Zealand School of Government. And one of the things that I tended to focus on in my research and teaching was good decision making. How institutions and processes and capabilities supported that. So I'm very privileged now to be not only in APS but also in public finance, working in those types of areas. And that segues into the second point that Mary made, which I want to pick up on, which is what I'm going to be talking about here, is about what's happening now, about how initiatives are being undertaken to affect change and to affect modernisation, which is designed to do some of the things that I was looking at from the outside in. Very happy to be here talking to you about this. Okay, before we start, my team found a couple of very interesting photographs. And these, in fact, probably date from the time of the Coombs report, which was the last great review into the APS, which, in fact, as Will alluded to, has set, if you like, the frame for the APS that we have at the moment. So I'm speaking about modernising the public sector and the changes that we'll need to make to become a public sector, public service of the future. But it's interesting to take a look at what the past was and how we've changed. And in fact, there are two key things to note here. One is change in the use of technology. As you can see, we've got technology strewn around that particular office place. It dominates the office place there. But in the second photo, which is taken from an ad or a brochure for the APS, you see a couple of things. Obviously, one, a number of roles which no longer exist. So typists, stenographers, but also a set of attitudes that no longer exists. So these are two things, two examples of great change which have occurred. In fact, what we're now looking at is how we can move. The second thing I wanted to quickly look at was the future. And on this slide, I've got a quote from PwC on one of the mega trends, again, that Will was talking about, that the APS is facing in terms of how we adapt ourselves. The digital revolution has no boundaries or borders. It is changing behaviour and expectations as much as the tools used to deliver new services and experiences. So what's important to take from this is that yes, we're focusing on behaviour, we're focusing on expectations, but we're also focusing on the tools to achieve those things. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in terms of the roadmap that's been put in place by the government for this type of modernisation. So let me very briefly summarise that for you in terms of the public sector reform context. So some of this may be familiar to you. In the 2018-19 preface to budget paper number 4, we have a description of the roadmap. And that's about ensuring better services for citizens and businesses delivered by a more efficient, effective and productive public service. And there are two sides to this story. One is a very outward facing story focused on providing better services to Australians, and the other one is focused on how we as a service are doing so in a way that makes the most of our limited resources. The roadmap is overseen by the Secretary's APS Reform Committee, or the ARC, and that committee is chaired by my Secretary, Rosemary Huxtable, and comprises a group of secretaries who are committed to APS reform, who are in fact investing their own resources and time and taking responsibility individually and collectively for reform initiatives. The roadmap focuses on short to medium term and includes a number of initiatives that have been announced in the budget, but are generally focused on customer service experience, that is how customers engage with government. And there are a number of examples. So two prominent ones are the Welfare Payment Infrastructure Transformation Program, which is making the majority of transactions digital and reducing claim times. That's something that's been administered by the Department of Human Services. And and another is veteran-centric reform, which is delivering a simpler and digitally enhanced experience for veterans, easier access to services and the ability to make and track claims online. That's administered by the Department of Veterans Affairs. The roadmap, which I've spoken, also includes 42 modernisation fund projects that are currently underway. The government has invested $500 million into these initiatives that will help us as a public service to modernise. Now, there are also another 25 projects being led by the Secretary's APS Reform Committee to improve operations behind the scenes, and Secretary's identified projects that don't need a government mandate and that we can potentially do within existing resources. So what I'd like to do today is now share in a little bit more detail 4 examples of the projects that are underway and give you a sense of what's happening. Very quickly before I do, it's also important to recognise that there's an opportunity for all of us to be involved in transformation, including sharing how we see things from our own perspectives. So with these opportunities in mind, I've listed 5 there. I'm going to reflect on the progress we've been making in driving reform agenda. So the first example I want to talk about is GovTeams. Some of you may be aware of GovTeams. Others may be aware of its predecessor, GovDex. GovTeams is an online collaboration platform. The great thing about it is that it's not limited to talking and collaborating with people in your own department or agency. You can collaborate online with people in other departments and agencies, but also people external to the public service. Now, it's currently in the beta stage, but you can go to govteams.gov.au, sign up and start using it now. Let me play a short video to give you a sense of what GovTeams is about.
Meetings. Oh, I forgot my meeting. Oh, I've got a meeting. Can we chat? No, I've got a meeting, sorry. Do you have time to talk? Oh, it's the meeting. The meeting. To work better together, we need to talk about things, but finding the right people, place and time is never easy. We work better as a team, so we've built GovTeams. It brings people, conversations and content together and provides tools to collaborate with colleagues and your industry partners across network boundaries. Connect on the go by video, audio or instant messaging. Plus, you can share and co-author files and more. Make private communities or thriving ones that can be joined by everyone. Now you have an individual profile that will stay with you throughout your APS career and will help people find you. And we've created a personalised dashboard that suggests communities you might want to connect with and information based on your interests. Plus all the other features you assumed you'd never get. You can even reconnect with mates from back in the day. GovTeams is designed by us, for us, so help us build it. We'll be improving it based on your feedback. Join up and get started so you can meet properly and work how you wish you could. GovTeams. Work better together.
We've set up a GovTeams community dedicated to APS employees called Modernising Public Sector Community. This community connects APS employees to share information about reform activities, issues and opportunities across APS. We'll use this community to upload information as a trusted source, create news, use video, audio capabilities to entice discussion about APS reforms. So once you've registered for GovTeams, just do a search for Modernising Public Sector Community and join the conversation. More broadly, teams across finance and APS are thinking about how to use GovTeams for the work they do now. The next project that I'd like to talk about is the Productivity Automation Centre of Excellence, or PACE. And this is something that's been driven through the Secretary's APS Reform Committee as well. You will have all heard about process automation, and it can sound quite daunting. Lots of work is underway across government on process automation. So PACE is about how we can bring these efforts together. The Department of Finance's PACE team has been established to help build the workforce of the future and enhance digital forms of service delivery to citizens. PACE provides support to Commonwealth agencies to enable them to do a number of things. Redesign their business to take advantage of digital technologies, better practice process design principles, implement robotic process automation in a systematic way across the APS, and establish common management functions across business units to enable cultural change and productivity. The benefit for teams using automations or digital assistants is a reduction in high volume, simple processing, allowing to focus on developing and delivering complex problem solving, emotional intelligence, negotiation, and a service orientation. I'll now show you a brief demonstration of a PACE automation. Now this is an actual automation to create correspondence. It's reading instructions from one side of the screen and enacting those instructions on the other. The automation has actually been slowed by 1,000 times. It shows the steps that would have previously been manually done by a human being. Automations like these have helped to improve the quality of output, resulting in fewer errors and less rework. So as an example, initial automation in the payroll area have led to a reduction of 15 minutes per activity, and that's around about an 80% reduction overall, as well as reduced error rates. So you can see from this example that process automation can free up humans from what some people have referred to as grunt work to allow them to make faster decisions and focus on more complex activities. The third example I'd like to share with you is a project of the National Health and Medical Research Council, which is exploring the use of machine learning to optimise the process of awarding research grants. The project has combined process automation with machine learning, and it too is funded by the Modernisation Fund. The Council has developed a Grants Management Accelerator, which is an advanced analytics solution that enables the Council to trawl through unstructured data quickly and evenly distribute grant applications to reviewers with relevant expertise, identify potential undeclared conflicts of interest, and enables much richer reporting of the long-term outcomes of investment in research. Importantly, the project involves automating the background work, not the complex or judgment elements required. So the accelerator provides decision support capabilities, which requires people to interact with the system and make final decisions. In the future, the Council will also be looking to use other publicly available information to augment researcher profiles through sources such as LinkedIn, news articles, and other social media. My last example today is the project of Geoscience Australia's Digital Earth Australia. Digital Earth Australia is an analysis platform that has a unique potential and poses a particular challenge to be exploited to its full potential. This project received boost funding through the Modernisation Fund to help push it forward. The platform works by using orbiting satellites to detect physical changes across Australia in unprecedented detail. Digital Earth Australia prepares petabytes of data from satellite imagery of Australian conditions that is available to governments and industry to use, including public servants, farmers and researchers. I'll now play again a short video to give you a sense of what the project is about.
One of the biggest challenges with satellite data is that it's massive. There are petabytes of data of this rich information, but it's so large and quite often it's so complex that it's incredibly difficult to use. What we've done through the Digital Earth Australia program is take that data, correct it, calibrate it and organise it so that it's easy to use and easy to have more people immediately start to extract value from this data.
We use it quite a lot already, and the potential is enormous. We use it to monitor water holdings. So there is what's called a Commonwealth Environmental Water Holding in the Parliament. They purchase and release water to help balance out our water across the continent here through agriculture, for communities and for industry, but also for the environment.
In the past, remote sensing was cost prohibitive to industry to access. Now data is open and free, making it fully accessible for identify new markets and where consumers can actually use remote sensing in areas they haven't done in the past. use particular applications, whether it's through smart devices to identify changes on the ground, whether it's relating to land changes or water quality changes. It's really a great opportunity for industry to be able to leverage off this open source data set.
What we're hoping to do with industry is actually make a range of tools available for customised use. So you can imagine a farmer having a tool to track his own irrigation scheduling or his own crop development. Likewise, you can imagine an individual landholder tracking the progress of their development, or even to target which property they buy next and what the risk of flood is for that. We see many applications. There's many opportunities for budding entrepreneurs to actually take this information and turn it into services for the general public.
To conclude, it's an exciting time to work in the public sector. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm sure many of you are here. If you'd like to hear more about the type of work and opportunities that are available to get involved, please don't hesitate to contact us at publicsectorreform@finance.gov.au or sign up to the GovTeams community. For access to our GovTeams communities, including our modernising the public sector community, we're going to get started registering with GovTeams can be found at govteams.gov. We're also intending to release a website to contact the GovTeams communities to further amplify our communication efforts, engage with